Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I declare this briefing session open at 6:30 p.m. The proceedings of the briefing session are electronically recorded in accordance with the council's recording and live streaming of council meetings policy. Except for matters of a confidential nature, the guide in determining those matters of a confidential nature is in accordance with the Local Government Act, and note that we have two of those this evening. Please note that the briefing sessions are audio recorded and audio live streamed only in accordance with council policy. First item, item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. I have a number that I'll read through and then see if any other declarations are there. All of these are from me, the first being for item 12.14. It's an interest that may affect impartiality as I work part-time for Thompson Gear and do not work on City of Joondalup matters. Item 12.13, also an interest that may affect impartiality as I work part-time for Thompson Gear and do not work on City of Joondalup matters. Another one for item 12.6, which is the legal services item. As I said, I work part-time for Thompson Gear. Thompson Gear have done some work for City of Joondalup. However, I do not work on these matters or with those teams. However, I will excuse myself from that item. And finally, for item 12.2, the State Development Assessment Unit decision for the 3 Delos Way proposal. The law firm I work for does work for some of the neighbouring property owners, but does not work for the proponent of this proposal. And I've declared that as an interest that may affect impartiality as it affects neighbours. Are there any other declarations of interest? If not, next item is deputations, of which there are none. The next item is public question time. No written questions have been received prior to the briefing session. However, there is a set of procedures which relates to public question time, and I'll request that you follow my direction at all times. You have an opportunity to ask up to 2 questions. Questions should be directed to the chair and asked in a polite and respectful manner. Questions asked at a briefing session must also relate to an item listed on the briefing agenda, and as per our meeting procedures rules, we'd ask that you'd state your name and address for the public record. Are there any questions? Please.
Michelle Kwok, 15 Carvel Ocean Reef. The question relating to the addendum, page 7, just looking at these capital works and Joondalup City Centre street lighting for 180,001. Is that part of the climate change smart street lighting, please?
I'll go to the director in the first instance, but my recollection is that is a long-running program, which actually was, the initial phases were happening before I even became mayor. So I don't, Director Klassen.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The city centre lighting project is the LED conversion of the street lights. If you just, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can just get that page number again you're referring to, I just want to make sure that is the project that you are referring to.
Page 7.
I think I can short circuit. I mean, it's not driven as a response to the climate change strategy. There might be the strategy. Yeah, it may have a link in, but that's not the driver. No. Do you have a second question?
No. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, that concludes public question time. We proceed to public statement time. I will just note I have another declaration of interest, apologies, from Director Humphrey for item 12.20, the club nightlights item. It's an interest that may affect impartiality as Director Humphrey is a member of the Whitfords Hockey Club. So next item being, as I said, public statement time. There's a set of procedures which relates to public statement time, and I request that you follow my direction at all times. You're able to make a statement for up to 2 minutes. Your statement should be directed to the chair and also be polite and respectful. No question or discussion will occur at the end of your statement, and statements made at a briefing session must relate to an item listed on the briefing session agenda. And as per question time, please state your name and address for the public record before making your statement. Are there any statements? If not, I declare public statement time closed. Thank you. Next item of business is apologies and leaves of absence. I have I received an apology from Councillor Hamilton Prime for this evening. Do we have any other apologies, Mr CEO?
None that I'm aware of, Mayor.
I should note both Councillors May and Pizzi did advise me that they intend to be here, but they are probably running a bit late. So that's noted. Are there any requests for a leave of absence? Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, if I could request the 3rd of March to the 12th of March inclusive.
3 March to 12th of March. Councillor Vinciulo.
Thank you. Through you. From April 3rd to 25th.
Thank you, Councillor Vinciulo. Further requests? Councillor Jones.
May the 13th to May the 22nd inclusive, please.
Thank you. Further requests? Short one for me, April 22nd to April 24th. Handy gap between Easter and Anzac Day. Any further requests? If not, next item of business on the agenda is confirmation of minutes, which will be dealt at the ordinary council meeting on the 25th, as will announcements by the presiding member without discussion, also on the ordinary council meeting. Identification of matters for which the meeting may be closed to the public. So, my apologies, there are 3. Item 12.4 being the Walk of Fame. Item 12.6, status of legal action reports, and item 12.23, the electricity supply agreement. As is my practice, I'll put those at the very end of the agenda, so we'll deal with all other business, and so anyone attending in the gallery, we'll get to your items before getting to those, hopefully, and so you don't need to wait around for us to finish that part of it. Next item of business is petitions. The City has received 2 petitions as follows. A petition in relation to the use of a property on Midlothian Crescent in Kinross being used as a holiday rental house. A 25 signature petition has been received from residents of the City in relation to the use of this property on Midlothian Crescent in Kinross and it being used as a holiday rental. And a second petition in relation to Megiddo Way, Duncraig footpath upgrade, requesting the City to not remove the existing crossover apron as part of the works. And a 26 signature petition has been received from residents of the City of Joondalup in relation to Megiddo Way and the Duncraig footpath update. Are there other petitions? Councillor Fishwick.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have a petition, but I have a question, if I may.
Councillor.
Thank you. In relation to 11.2, the e-petition closed on the 30th of December 24, requesting that the City leaves in track the existing crossovers as part of the apron for the new footpath 1.8 metres back from the curb. Given that a petition requires the CEO to prepare a report for Council to determine the matter, was any consideration to deferring the works pending a Council decision on this matter?
Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the notification of works that was sent to the Mayor and Ward Councillors acknowledged that there is a petition to be submitted to this council meeting for council to receive the petition. As this footpath was the subject of a petition and safety improvements around that school specifically, the decision was made to continue with the works.
Thank you for that answer. Just given that the installation of the works did commence on the 28th of January, that's nearly a month after the petition was received, I would consider that it might be appropriate if a process could be considered when a petition is received to be developed or in fact affect infrastructure, particularly the amenity of residents, that before any action's taken, that petition is then considered by the council because we are the decision makers. So when this petition now comes, it's already, the cart's way before the horse. So my question is, can that be a procedure be reviewed for infrastructure works when a petition is received, so those works be deferred until the petition is considered?
I'll respond to that one, Councillor. My suggestion would be that we raise it future strategy session or an appropriate meeting as council, just as we developed the protocol that currently exists for petitions. So, fair point. My suggestion is that we raise that soon at one of our future sessions as a council and discuss how we would do that.
Following on from your answer, Mr Mayor, that could take some time, so would it be appropriate for me to lodge a notice of motion that it be considered at a strategy session with a date?
I will leave that to your discretion, Councillor Fishwick. I'll leave that one to your discretion. Next, any other petitions? Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, sorry, not a petition, just a question in relation to 11.1. And I was seeking some clarity from the city in relation to it being used as a holiday rental home. Just if I could get some clarity on what the council's, say, part involved in this, with it being a holiday rental home, what authorities the council has to stop this, or I'm not understanding what the holiday rental home has to do with the local council in relation to that, please.
We'll take that on notice, Councillor O'Neill, and seek the Director to give you an update on that. Thank you. Next item of business following petitions is reports. There aren't, at this stage, presentations planned for any of the public items, although the supply agreement contestable sites will include a presentation. So I'll commence at the beginning and work my way through. First item being 12.1, development and subdivision applications. Any questions on this item? 12.2, Delos Way. Any questions on this item? Ward Councillor first. Councillor Vinciolo.
Thank you. Through you, I have just a few questions, if you don't mind, and a request. I'd like to firstly thank the city for the notes. Plenty to work with. I do have some questions. The first one I'd like to start off with is a bit of clarity on building height inconsistencies. The JDRP expresses a strong preference for 5, possibly 6 stories. I'm a bit perplexed. Which is it, 5 or 6? Why is there such fluidity in this recommendation? This lack of clarity for me kind of fuels resident concerns, particularly when the city's long-standing planning position has always been a maximum of 3 to 4. So why would the city allow a design review panel to override its established planning framework?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. The Joondalup Design Review Panel, and perhaps I'll start explaining just what they are. The JDRP is a group of experts that's appointed by council to provide the city with a range of independent advice on things surrounding architecture, urban design, landscape design, as well as sustainability aspects. They only have an advisory function, so they're not, they don't have a decision-making capacity, and city officers aren't bound by their recommendations or suggestions, and their views don't override any statutory requirement that might be in place, including things around height. Design review panels, they're intended to complement a planning assessment process rather than override it, as I said. So, for example, they can assist when we need to exercise some discretion. So when a development doesn't meet a particular standard, but as I said before, they don't have a decision-making power. They typically avoid trying to provide absolute clarity about any changes to a design. Their role is to really guide design rather than direct an applicant on how a building should be changed to be more suitable. But in doing so, I acknowledge that sometimes their recommendations are perhaps inconsistent with what the statutory framework is because they're not bound by it like city officers are. And I also appreciate that when they are not directive in their responses, it creates a bit of a frustration because there's not that clarity that a decision maker or a community might be expecting from the design review panel. It's not a unique thing for the city of Joondalup. It's a frustration that is expressed about design review in the broader sense, and I know that the Department of Planning at the moment are reviewing their design review guide to try and improve the process, and so there is more clarity around the role as well as the outcomes that the design review panels are chasing.
Okay. Talking about the planning process then, like the deviation from the Hillary Structure Plan number 20, given that the structure plan is still active and explicitly supports small lot residential development, why is a high-rise apartment development even being considered? If the WAPC and the SDAU can override the structure plan, what does that mean for the future of our local planning policies?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The very long story short is, whilst there are local structure plans, local planning schemes, local planning policies that are in place that guide how a development should be designed, and they also serve as the framework that we make an assessment against, there's nothing to stop an applicant or a proponent from lodging whatever they want, whether it's entirely consistent or entirely inconsistent with the planning framework. So I suppose that is why you end up in a situation with what elected members are discussing this evening, where you end up with a development that is inconsistent on a number of elements with the local structure plan down there in Hillary's. In terms of what it means for the future of our policies, more broadly, the WA planning system is set up to be performance-based, so it's inherently embedded with the ability to exercise discretion and deviate, if you like, for want of a better word, from what a standard or guide might be. But in doing so, there needs to be a very good reason to deviate from those policies, and there are usually a significant amount of criteria that a decision maker will use to assess whether or not that deviation is appropriate or not. Again, there's more improvements and reform coming into the planning system around providing guidance for decision makers, ensuring that they are making appropriate decisions when to exercise discretion, and making sure they're accountable and transparent in the reasons that they're using to exercise that discretion.
Okay. I've had obviously a lot of discussions with residents, and there is the traffic and safety considerations that are in play, and I've had a good read. And what I'd like to know is, has the city conducted its own independent traffic impact assessment, or is it relying solely on the developer's assessment? And given the increased density or potential increased density, does the city have any concerns about increased congestion on Delos Way, Seawood Loop, and access points onto Hepburn Avenue?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The city hasn't undertaken its own traffic impact assessment. It's not an uncommon thing that the city wouldn't undertake its own assessment. In relation to planning proposals that are required to submit traffic assessments, the approach undertaken by the city, which is very typical of a local government's approach, is to review the traffic impact statement in this instance that's provided by the applicant. We review the assumptions that underpin the modelling outcomes that the applicant's assessments arrived at. We also ensure that aligns with the data that we have in-house, and we also ensure that the modelling's been undertaken in accordance with industry standards. It's not always the case that the report that's attached to an item for elected members' consideration is the original report. Often, if we are reviewing a report and we do identify some concerns we have with the modelling or the assumptions, they'll be conveyed back to the applicant. They may be required to update the report to, I guess, correct it or align it with what the city's expectations are. Yep. In this instance, in relation to whether or not we have any concern with traffic and intersection impacts, we reviewed the traffic impact statement. We were comfortable with the modelling and the outputs, which demonstrated that there was sufficient capacity within the local network to support the increase in traffic volumes. What we are concerned about is the proximity of the crossover on Delos Way to Hepburn Avenue and the potential impact that'll have on some of the queuing for vehicles to Hepburn Ave. And so we've raised those with the applicant. There's been a suggestion that they'll look to relocate the crossover further south on Delos Way. We believe that will resolve the issues that we have at the moment, but in our recommendation prior to the WAPC making a decision or considering the application, we're suggesting that the traffic impact statement needs to be updated and the modelling rerun just to confirm that the relocation satisfies what our concerns are.
Based on the community consultation part of it, we know that 76% of the community submissions oppose the proposal. Given that the majority of residents are dead set against this development moving forward, how does the city intend to ensure their voices are going to be reflected in the decision-making process?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. So with this type of application, because it is channelled via the Significant Development Assessment Unit, they're responsible for the entire assessment process, which includes consultation. So we're not involved in the consultation process, and we aren't in receipt of any copies of the submissions that are made. So given that we don't receive the submissions, we also don't know who's necessarily made a submission, and we don't necessarily have their contact details. So we don't have an ability to advise them directly of any additional updates with the application. But what we can do is, when we are notified that the Commission are going to be considering the application, we can make that information available broadly. We can channel it through elected members, and there's an opportunity for the community then to become aware of when the Commission are considering the application, and then they have the opportunity to register to make a presentation or a deputation to the WAPC ahead of it making its decision. Equally, I would imagine the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage through its offices would be alerting anyone that made a submission directly and letting them know when the application's being considered.
And that's what I find interesting when it comes to the SDAU side of things. Like, for me, can we request greater transparency regarding the process and why the city was excluded from those discussions? And what legal options does the city have to push back against developments that clearly do not align with our local planning policies?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. In terms of greater transparency, the SDAU process is an interesting one in that it does have a very formal pre-lodgement process that an applicant needs to step through before a proposal is formally accepted. We have limited involvement, but we are on occasion invited to reviews undertaken by the State Design Review Panel. Again, our role there is very limited. It's confined to an observing role. We're sometimes asked about the local planning framework, but we don't receive any outcomes of that design review panel or any recommendations of it. And we're reminded that certainly through the pre-lodgement process, the process itself is confidential. So we do, I guess we're restricted or constrained in terms of being able to share information with elected members as well as our community. It's certainly something that we can request greater transparency of, but I think the SDAU process is deliberately set up to be confidential at that pre-lodgement stage. So it gives the opportunity to investigate whether a proposal will see the light of day or not. But having said that, it's obviously a view that we can take and share with the department. In terms of the legal abilities, I'm happy to take the question on notice and provide a little bit more information in the briefing pack. But my initial reaction would be the legal ability to intervene would be fairly limited. There's no third-party appeal rights in WA, and that extends to local government. it would really, off the top of my head, we'd have to identify an error in law in the decision-making process rather than it not meeting community expectations. But as I said, happy to take that question on notice, give it some more thought and include some information in the briefing pack.
Thank you, and thank you for answering my questions. I've just got one little request. I acknowledge the technical and complicated nature of planning, which is definitely reflected in some of the language used in the report. Whilst this will mean something to people that operate in the space, it would be most likely difficult for the casual observer or general community member to understand the key issues at play and the city's position. So I'm kindly requesting, as part of the briefing session notes, a short summary written with greater emphasis on plain English that emphasises the key issues with the development and why the city does not support it.
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Yep, happy to prepare something for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thanks, through you, Mr Mayor. On page 20, it is stated that DPLH has invited the city to provide information, comment or recommended conditions on the proposal by Friday the 28th of February 2025. On page 35, under risk management considerations, it is clearly stated that a formal response is to be submitted to WAPC by Friday the 21st of February 2025. It is also stated that if any request for extension of time is not granted, then the application will be determined by WAPC without a formal position from the city. Given that the ordinary council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday the 25th of February, please can I request clarification of this apparent discrepancy regarding the submission deadline date? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. The reference to the 21st of February is outdated, so the original submission timeframe was 21st of February. We advised them that council's meeting was the 25th of February, and they subsequently granted an extension to the 28th. So the 21st is superseded by the 28th.
Thanks. Therefore, can I just ask that discrepancy resolved in the agenda for the council meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chester?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've always understood that views are not guaranteed over time. I'm just querying recommendation 3, which requests that the State Development Assessment Unit consider and determine any potential impact on views of significance. I wonder if the Director could explain the inconsistency there.
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Views, as you put it, Councillor Chester, simply no one, and it's often referred to as no one owns a view. There is planning requirements that when an application is greater than what the prescribed maximum height of a building can be, certainly in a residential context, and a decision maker needs to take into account the potential impact on views of significance, is what it's referred to. And so, quite simply, if a building met its height requirement or sat within the maximum height requirement, then it is, in a residential context, it is deemed to comply, and therefore you are allowed to build to that height irrespective of the impact that you have. When you go beyond that, that's when the potential impact on a view is a valid consideration. And so in this instance, because the structure plan talks about a height limit of 3 stories, this building is proposing 7 stories. The decision maker needs to step into that space and consider what the impact on views may be. At this stage, we don't believe there's enough information in the supporting documents that the application contains that would allow that assessment in terms of impact on views to be carried out completely. And so that's why we're suggesting that the SDAU needs to consider that more fully before they make a recommendation and the Commission make a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. My question goes to the SDA approvals generally. Are we aware of any case in which the SDAU has refused an application that has been put to it, given that it has substantially more discretion that it can exercise than any other planning decision maker.
Director? Okay. Or Ms Temple?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. We'll take that question on notice and provide some information on the pack. We don't know off the top of our head. We think they may have, but I just want to be confident we'll provide that information in the pack for you.
Thank
Councillor?
you. I appreciate that because I tried to find out with Warwick Quarter and I couldn't find any at that time. But secondly, as far as the deputations to the WAPC, when this goes through the process, is it appropriate or possible to have city officers present to the WAPC at that time, given the final report then would be released with at least some understanding of what the commentary from the public is? Is there any benefit in that?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. It is possible, and whilst we've not presented to the WAPC on an SDAU application in the past, we have, as officers, presented Council's decision on other applications that are being considered by the WAPC. I think the caveat that I would suggest be considered is if Council's decision is consistent with the officer decision, I could see that being appropriate, and that would give the city, in the broader sense, both Council and the administration, the opportunity to convey Council's decision to the WAPC on the day that they're considering the application. If there is a significant deviation from the officer recommendation and Council's decision, then if Council still wanted its position to be represented, it would probably be more appropriate to identify either a representative of Council or potentially even engage a separate planning consultant.
Yep.
Councillor?
And just lastly, if the council is of the mind to agree with the officer's recommendation, is it best that the discussions for that occur further down the road, closer to the deputation date, or is it something that has to be formally decided through a council meeting?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I don't believe it necessarily needs to be made as part of a council decision. It may be, there may be benefit in, first of all, understanding what the recommendation is that the WAPC will be considering, and therefore a decision could be made as to whether or not it, in the first instance, it would be best suited to make a deputation, and then secondly, what that deputation would contain.
I'll leave it there, but thank you. I'm just thinking of different ways to support the residents on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Raftis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question through you. Just curious as to, given the size of this proposal, whether similarly do we have any update on the master plan development for Hillary's Boat Harbour? Because I believe there was a potential hotel flagged pretty much across the road was my recollection, but it's going back for a few years. So just, are we aware of any progress in that development?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I'm not aware of any development to progress the aspirations of the Hillary's master plan, but I'm happy to take that question on notice. We can engage with the Department of Transport to see if they're able to provide any further information or guidance for us. So happy to follow that up.
Councillor?
Thank you. And similarly, are we able to contemplate with the potential changes under that Hillary structure? Because I know the state government's started committing some money towards some of the features of it, namely a skate park, but if that's going to progress, then the amended traffic structure for that area, would that impact and potentially have an impact on these developments that we're looking at?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I would not think that what's planned or intended to come at Hillary's Boat Harbour to have any significant impact on traffic for this development. the majority of the traffic impact for this is going to be confined to the immediate local road network around the site rather than the other arterials. But I'm happy to take that question on notice and give it some more consideration and include some information for elected members in the briefing pack. But my initial thought would be I wouldn't think changes to Hillary's Boat Harbour would have a significant impact on this development from a traffic point of view.
Councillor?
Thank you. Just as part of that request, because currently the traffic goes through the main roundabout and then it can queue up within that driveway internally within the harbour. Under the amended plan, that entrance would be put in front of the main car park up towards where all the main car park is. So I see is there a potential for a backlog of cars which would then back towards that key roundabout and potentially create traffic issues in front of this development and hinder access to it?
I'll take that as a statement. Further questions? Next item then being item 12.3, beach umbrellas and equipment hire. Any questions on this item? Councillor Kingston?
Thank you. Just lost the page there. The first question I have goes to the venue hire aspect, which is spoken about on page 41. So it says here that it's possible for a potential vendor to hire the beach and then place beach gear on the beach. So I'm wondering that is what's being suggested under that heading similar to what happens in Bali and in the Mediterranean where we have all these seats across the beach, and then so members of the public would then have to approach that vendor and then get an allocated seat? Is that what's being envisaged under that heading?
Director Lee or Mr Wilcock?
Thank you, and through the Mayor, thank you for that question. Yes, it is a statement just to identify that the beach and the foreshore, up to the high tide mark is dealt with in any way that we would deal with any park, any verge, or anything like that. So it's Crown land under management order, which means all of our planning and guidelines are assessed as part of that. It would be pretty closely assessed. It would be very closely looked at, and in line with wanting to do something like that in one of our public parks. It's not something that would happen commonly, and it would be pretty exceptional. But the point is that it is permitted. It is available. If someone wanted to look at that on a case by case and an exceptional basis.
Councillor?
Thank you. I think I'll probably flag probably either an alternate or a point 4 to say that having all those beach chairs across the beach is something that should be, I don't think that's something that the public would want under the venue hire policy. So I'll be foreshadowing that I will be seeking a number 4 for that. But moving on, a further question I have is, do we have any indication from the public about whether they support having beach gear, beach equipment for hire at the beaches in Joondalup? And the reason why I raised this, I saw a post on Facebook this afternoon on the Mullu Collective.
I will just keep it to questions, Councillor.
That's all right.
Mr Wilcock. Thank you. Mr Wilcock.
Thank you. No, at this point, we haven't undertaken any specific and direct public consultation in relation to this. We have basically worked with other neighbouring councils who have feedback from their community as to how often and what the level of use would be, and the community support for it. Given we've indicated in a couple of points in the item that pretty much most of these would be as a commercial entity, commercial activation, it wouldn't be the City of Joondalup doing it, so it would be a commercial entity working out if the public wants it, then they supply it and they continue. If the public doesn't want it, then as a commercial enterprise, they stop supplying it.
Councillor?
Thank you. And just on that, Just lastly, I guess, the cost of the report, and just briefly, I just saw a poll on Facebook which said 80% of residents, at least on that poll, weren't supportive of this. So I'm just trying to understand, is that, do we have anything to say that there is public sentiment for this is how the public would like these beaches to be used in any of the city's previous coastal surveys or anything like that?
Mr Wilcock.
Thank you for that. I guess the best way of explaining that is what we're proposing here is nothing that wouldn't already be on the beaches. So as you go down to the beach and you see umbrellas and you see beach equipment and people with snorkels and flippers and those sorts of things, nothing is being proposed that isn't already at the beach. Mm-hmm. What's proposed is a different way of being able to access those umbrellas and those other equipment, which means you don't have to bring it to the beach, you can grab it while you're down there. So the indication that the public would want these things is by seeing that these are the things that are actually on the beach. And again, I reiterate that this would be a commercial enterprise. If the community and the public don't want it, they won't hire it, the business will stop hiring it.
And just lastly, if I could just get on notice the cost of preparing this report from the notice of motion, but I appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hutton.
Yeah, on the similar section that was being asked with the heading basically saying that it's already possible to hire out a beach space, I just want to clarify that you have to do it at the moment on an hourly basis, is that right? There's no way to hire a section for a fixed or repetitive period in time?
Mr Wilcock.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kingston, could you turn your microphone off, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. If you could as well, please, Councillor Hutton, that would be handy. Thank you. Mr Wilcock.
Thank you for the question through the Mayor. So the venue hire charges policy is the thing that guides that. So as I understand it, yes, that would be on an hourly basis that the hiring would occur.
Through preparing this report, did the city look at examples such as Bathurst Beach House in Fremantle, where there's a licensed, basically licensed beds on the beach outside of the licensed facility?
Director. Mr Wilcock, yes.
Thank you, and that question, and through the Mayor, we had tried to focus on the request through the notice of motion, as opposed to going beyond that scope. We had identified that you could hire the venue hire fees allowed for that. We didn't go down the avenue of where that was in examples. We tried to focus on the examples of where the notice of motion was most relevant, and that, as the report identifies, in Scarborough, in the City of Stirling, and we've provided some feedback in that. So in answer to the question, no, we didn't do that because the notice of motion didn't ask us to do that.
Councillor.
Yeah, just following on from those two questions, under the expression of interest option listed in the paper, would that allow for vendors to apply for repetitive time slots, similar to the way that food vendors would do when they have a food truck?
Mr Wilcock.
Thank you, and through the Mayor, I guess that what we've identified here in the expression of interest is that there would be, if we were to go down this path, there are a lot of factors being considered, and I guess you've just identified another factor that we would need to consider should we go down the expression of interest. So if we go down the expression of interest and council decide to do that, I think we would pick up your comment and we would try to pick that up as part of a running expression of interest. It's not recommended due to the complexity at this point.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. And now I know this might feed into the expression of interest, but has there been any consideration for the types of beaches that the city might deem to be suitable for this exercise, for example, within Hillary's Marina?
Mr Wilcock.
Thank you for that question. Through the Mayor, for Hillary's beach harbour wasn't considered in any case because that is a Department of Transport, so the City of Joondalup doesn't have any control over that beach, and you do actually see some of these activities occurring at the Hillary's boat harbour, such as there's a sauna down there. That is on Department of Transport land. So we didn't look at that at the Hillary's boat harbour. The expression of interest was something that we drew heavily from, again, from the City of Stirling experience and looked at the expression of interest they ran, and we tried to keep our comments on the expression of interest to the notice of motion and the request of the notice of motion, which was equipment hire.
Further questions? Councillor Hutton?
Yeah, so just the final one. Again, just so we have all the information before us for the council meeting, could I request that an alternate motion be prepared to pursue with the expression of interest option? And obviously for, I guess, costs associated with that to be included. And second to that, it would probably also be worthwhile including another alternate option to provide for community consultation. You say if I can request both of those be drafted.
Mr Wilcock?
Yes, thank you, through the Mayor. Yes, we can work with you on that.
Councillor Raftis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just seeking clarity whether we would be able to be provided with a list of the potential designated areas specified within the recommendation.
Mr Wilcock?
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the Mayor, what we've identified there is that the locations would be those locations. So we identified that the mobile traders permits, so only within those areas which have existing mobile traders permits. Just to clarify the question, we can provide you with a list of the existing mobile traders permits if you would like.
Councillor?
I wasn't aware that mobile traders could trade actually on the sand of the beach, so I'm just trying to see clarity around where we're going to offer these services, and that those areas are, which are those areas that we're talking about.
Mr Wilcock?
Thank you for the question, through the Mayor. I guess I do want to make it clear we're not proposing to offer any areas at all. What we're proposing is that those who have existing got mobile trader permits where there are licences that already exist, which we can provide you with a list of, that they would then be, we would make them aware that they could make an application to include equipment as part of their trading. So those with existing mobile traders permits would then be told, if you'd like to make an application, you can make an application to sell coffee, toasted sandwiches, if they're already allowed to do those things, and beach umbrellas. So that's only the ones who've already got that. If you seek a new designated location, such as the designated areas, that would need to be an application from the public as a commercial enterprise to the city. We're not proposing to identify any particular new or specific locations at all.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so just checking my clarity, we're talking about these operators will be on the grassed areas or car park areas and not operating directly on the beach. The equipment will be used on the beach, but they will operate back from the beach. Is that correct?
Mr Wilcock?
Thank you for the question, through the Mayor. Yeah, so there are different options identified. So those who have actually got mobile trader permits, they're all operating from car parks, and they're given dates, times, places, and the things they can trade from. So that's from beach car parks. It's also places not at the beach, but we're expecting this would only be on the areas of the beach. So that would be mobile traders permits that can expand. If someone wants to identify a designated area to hire some equipment to set up a new a business, whether to hire a piece of a park in which to store their equipment and then hire it out to people who then walk down to the beach with it, or in fact to come to us and say we'd like to hire a piece of the beach, then that would have to be by an application. We are not proposing any particular locations. We're just saying that is something that people can do right now under the council's policy. And as the paper identifies, no one's identified that as being a viable business proposition, so no one has come forward to ask us to do that. But that is possible right now.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Following the reference made to people being able to hire spaces currently under the hire facility arrangement, are we able to get those areas identified? Because I'm presuming we're referring to areas that are not existing parks, so just seeking clarity in terms of any foreshore areas or whatever, what areas can be hired through that current arrangement. Can they be identified and listed for us, please?
Mr Wilcock?
Thank you, through the Mayor. I'll take that on notice. I envisage we will probably be able to provide you with a map with, you know, those areas that, that currently sit under the city's management order, which would fall into this category, which would be large parts of the city, include all the city's parks and verges and beach areas as identified. We can provide that to you.
Yes, thank you. And if you can confirm that it's accessible through the online booking system and how that is, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Vinciolo?
Thank you, through you. You mentioned about not being currently, well, it doesn't appear to be viable for a provider to get involved in such a proposition. I just wanted to know, from a city perspective, is it possible for exclusivity arrangements for multiple locations if a provider did present itself? Mr Wilcock?
Yeah, thanks for that question, through the Mayor. I don't believe we would be able to do an exclusivity. That would probably fall under the expression of interest category. I think if we wanted to run an expression of interest and only have one provider and then they could have multiple locations, I think if I understand you correctly, that could be a expression of interest form that we put out. We would have to look at whether we felt that was viable and whether that was going to be manageable and fair and equitable. At the moment, what we're talking about as the viability is those people who already operate, already run businesses like at Mullaloo Beach, have indicated that they don't have any interest in doing this, as they don't see that there's a business model that people would come and hire these things, so they don't want to do it. So, yeah, well, I guess we could look at the viability of, so I guess in short answer, yes, through the expression, if we ran an expression of interest process, yes. Under the people coming to us, if someone wants to, you know, use the venue hire fees, we couldn't make that exclusive. We couldn't say only, yeah, that you couldn't do that.
Thank you. Item 12.5, execution of documents. Any questions on this item? Councillor Kingston?
Thank you. My question is about just the variations to the lease, which is proposed for the Ocean Reef Sea Sports Club, so the partial surrender of lease. Could I just get more information on that particular transaction and how it also relates to the lease that the city has with the Sea Sports Club and the proposed time frame for removing the building and when the new building will be completed?
Director Humphrey?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I will take the question on notice and provide details in the packs, but it does have to do with the hardstand area the Sea Sports Club previously had their equipment stored upon, so they've had to surrender that to allow for works. The remaining information I'll provide in the packs.
12.7, status of council decisions, February 2025. Any questions on this item? 12.8, minutes of regional council meetings. Any questions on this item? Councillor Hutton?
Apologies, just pulling up my question. Got to that quicker than I was expecting. In the Catalina Regional Council minutes, item 9.11, which is on page 574, the council moved a motion. Point 3 of the motion reads, requests the Mindarie Regional Council to investigate options to expedite the closure of Tamala Park landfill in a timely and orderly manner. I just wanted to ask the administration if that was in line and consistent with the position of the City of Joondalup.
Director Parry? Yeah, probably more to Director Klassen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The position of the City of Joondalup Council was discussed at a confidential meeting and then deferred. I don't think I'm at liberty to provide that position in the open here.
Further questions on this item?
Can I just clarify that the recommendation of the council was released publicly in the minutes? My question was just clarifying that the line taken by the CRC was consistent with the released position taken by the city in the publicly available minutes.
Director Humphrey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in responding, it should be noted that the Catalina Regional Council is not bound by any decision or position that the City of Joondalup has. I believe Director Classen's response is probably the most we can provide in this session, but I'm happy to take the question notice and provide more details in the packs in writing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on this item? Item 12.9, local government reform consultation, CEO KPIs and online registers. Questions on this item? Councillor Raftis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering, in terms of commenting on KPIs, are we able to make any comment regarding if there's financial KPIs? The issues of timing, given that audited accounts are typically not delivered until after perhaps a performance review is scheduled.
Can you rephrase that question? I didn't really, unless Director Parry.
I have a challenge, like, for example, if the KPI is set on a financial deliverable, the audited accounts are not, for example, signed off until December. So in terms of timing...
Councillor Raftis, can you just rephrase the question? I didn't really get what you were asking.
Okay. Are we able to put a comment in there, or are we able to, as part of this submission, make a comment around the issue of timing of financial information in terms of being able to undertake a performance review of the CEO, given the audited accounts are typically received after an annual, the timing of the annual performance review?
Director Parry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, anything's possible within this submission. You would probably have most of those, any financial KPIs that were relevant to the CEO's performance, probably wouldn't be subject to them being audited. You'd probably have a draft financial statement prior to the CEO's performance assessment. If it was subject to the auditor providing audited statements, it's probably not something that will be able to be put within the CEO's KPIs, depending on the timing, again, of the CEO's performance assessment. Ours is undertaken in August of each year. It would be impractical to be able to have audited statements prior to that performance review being undertaken.
Councillor Raftis.
Yeah, my query is, what is then the potential situation where an adjustment to the audited accounts changes the performance review outcome for a financial measurement, as happened with an adjustment 4.9 million for our annual financial accounts for 2024.
Director Parry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a valid question in relation to the annual performance of a CEO, but the council is not prohibited from undertaking a review of the CEO's performance at any time during the year, and I think that is encouraged through the CEO performance standards, which are now a city policy, and the council or the CEO Performance Review Committee meets on a quarterly basis to discuss the CEO's performance as well. So I think that should satisfy that requirement if there is any dissatisfaction with performance in relation to the finances.
Thank you. 12.10, Corporate Business Plan 24 to 28, Quarter 2 Report. Questions on this item? Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On page 873 of the appendices, in relation to the Sorrento Surf Lifesaving Club, can I just get a date when the actual detailed design was commenced on the August 23, it's due to complete on September 29, 25, which is over 2 years. It just seems a long time for the design. Is that right, or what are the architects doing? Seems to be a long amount of time to design something, 2 years.
I'm just looking for someone to put their hand up to take that question. Director Humphrey.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll take it on notice, provide further update in the packs. Detailed design can take a long time. I think the actual goal in the corporate business plan refers to detailed design as that process starting. That was when the goal initially was listed, but as I'll take it on notice and provide further response in the packs.
Further questions? 12.11, Corporate Sponsorship Application, Peter Cowan Writers Centre Incorporated. Any questions on this item? Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Could I get a breakdown of the employee and staff costs that are contained in the application, given that's the majority of the money that is sought?
Director Parry.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, we can seek that information from the sponsor applicant. And
just following on that as well, their application mentions multiple times about paying the committee of their association. Can we just get a confirmation that this is not going to be used to pay the committee? They seem to be indicating that if this event turns a profit, then out of that profit they might pay their committee, but just making sure that the committee is not going to be paid out of the funds which are then allocated towards the festival.
Director Parry.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll take that question on notice and clarify that within the briefing notes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on this one? Item 12.12, Corporate Sponsorship Application, Wanneroo Basketball Association. Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In relation to our sponsorship for the West Perth Football Club, we did ask them to reconsider changing it to the Joondalup Football Club. So has any discussions been held with the Wanneroo Basketball Association to change its name to the Joondalup Basketball Association, given that we're the major sponsor and they are located within our district?
My understanding is their association incorporation name is Wanneroo Basketball Association, but in every way possible they trade as the Joondalup Wolves. So this is the Joondalup Wolves, it's just that they were incorporated under that name so that the grant sits under that name. So they, in fact, in our discussions with West Perth, we often hold them up as the example because they have done so. They even carry Joondalup green as their colour, and they are the Joondalup Wolves. Councillor Fishwick. Councillor Raftis.
Thank you. Question, with the lifting of the sponsorship from 20 to 30 from previous years, are we then expecting a subsequent matching of this with the Warwick basketball team to match the 30K for them, please?
Director Parry.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's very difficult to respond to without an application being submitted by that particular club. They would certainly have to demonstrate that they had lifted the criteria or the matching of the criteria to be able to meet the assessment against which we have done for this particular case.
Further questions? 12.13, list of payments made for the month of November 2024. Questions on this item? Councillor Chester.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at briefing attachment page 982, and the item is EF 124428, and it refers to $250,000 spent on the coastal path upgrade near the Mullaloo Surf Lifesaving Club. I wonder if I could just be reminded of the extent of the work and why it was required. Thank you.
Director Klassen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Chester, I'm just trying to catch up on the payment itself.
Could you just outline the first bit, please, Councillor Chester?
Yes, it's about 2/3 of the way down the page.
Page, have you got the page, Director Klassen? Oh.
The work was done by BOS Civic Proprietary Limited.
Director?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. The position there is the widening of the coastal path. That's the part of the election commitment from the state government. So the works, total of the works on the coastal paths, around $8.5, $9 million. That's one of the contracts that's delivering that upgrade.
And just confirming it was state government money that undertook the work.
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, the majority is state government money. I think through the budget, I think around 80% is state government money.
Further questions? Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only a few this month, if I may. The first one is on page 976 in relation to the sauna hire from Alchemy Saunas, EF 124780. It was previously discussed a couple of months ago in relation to whether this was a monthly figure or a yearly figure when it appeared last time. I'd like some clarification from the city in relation to the cost benefit, if we could do some sort of analysis on that versus memberships versus the fees of this and how many people actually do use it, to see if we could break down whether it is actually beneficial to be having this monthly charge there. That'd be the first one.
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll take the question notice and we can provide that information.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. The second one is on page 979 in relation to a Sapphire Mark 1 seat and a Sapphire Mark 1 chair. Two payments there to RTL WA, I think they are. There's $380.60 and $426.80 for two individual chairs is what it seems. If I could get some clarification on that.
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, I'll take that on notice and provide that information.
Councillor?
Thank you. The next one would be on page 993, and that is for Enchanted Characters Proprietary Limited, EF 124470, charge of $1,650 for 2 hours, I believe, 2 hours of stilt walking. Could I please get some clarification on that as well? Thank you.
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, that would be for a public event, but I'll take the question notice and provide the event details in the packs.
Thank you. Just a couple more there. Just on page 996, EF 124707, Good Dogs Proprietary Limited for a charge of $7,507.50. Could I get some understanding as to what that was in relation to?
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, if memory serves correct, XCR Motor Sports provide the Mullaloo Triathlon. It is likely a bond refund, but I will check and provide that information to PAX.
Thank you. And just two more on page 1003, EF 124870 for JB Hi-Fi. There was a purchase of a Canon EOS R10 mirrorless camera for $2,639 and speakers for leisure short courses for $1,328. Just wondering if I can get some clarity in what those were used for, and is this a continuation use or is it a city asset? Something, if I could get some clarity on that.
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, both are city assets. One, I believe, is used within our community and stakeholder relations team for capturing images. The second is for providing events at Craigie Leisure Centre where we need rather loud speakers to be able to get above the crowd, but I will take that question on notice and provide exact details.
Thank you. And just the last one is page 1014, EF 124674, Nintex as a, oh no, sorry, it's not Nintex, sorry. It's Nightlife Music Proprietary Limited is it? The charge was 47,000. Oh yeah, it wasn't in text. $47,333.75 for a subscription. Could I get some clarity on that?
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, Nintex is the system the city uses for approvals internally within the administration function. So if an approval is required from a senior officer, the form's filled out electronically and processed by the Nintex system. I'll provide details of how many users and exact licensing in the packs.
Just if I could on that, could we possibly get some clarity if there's cheaper options for these systems?
Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, I'll provide the details of procurement and the quoting that was undertaken at that time.
Thank you. Further questions? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just a question. Is it possible for elected members to actually submit similar requests by email? And if so, what would be the deadline for submitting those questions in order to get answers in the briefing pack? Thank you.
Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, typically we would ask for the email to be received by 3 p.m. of the day of the briefing session. We would then endeavour to have that information in the briefing packs on the Friday.
Thank you. Item 12.14, list of payments made for the month of December 2024. Any questions on this item? Councillor Raftis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Page 1074. We've got Hayes Specialist Recruitment. We've got Helene Proprietary Limited as logo appointment. For labour hire, just wondering if we can get a report in the pack this week of all the payments made to recruitment labour hire providers for the 6 months to December, please.
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, yes, we can provide a summary to the 31st of December. What we can also do is provide the names of the labour hire companies we use. There is information on the portal to allow elected members to track payments year to date for those providers.
Thank you. Item 12.15, financial activity statement for November 2024. Any questions on this item? 12.16, financial activity statement for December 24. Any questions on this item? 12.17, card transactions for the month of November 2024. Any questions on this item? 12.18, card transactions for the month of December 24. Questions on this item? 12.19, extension of contract for the supply and delivery and installation of gates, bollards and bushland fencing. Questions on this item? Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to this one here, with the extension of the contract, could the city please outline possible ramifications if it goes to tender again, or is it possible for the city to enter negotiations for better deals or better prices prior to entering into another, what would essentially be a contract, not an extension of contract, with the current supplier?
Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the city's not able to, I'll answer the second part of the question first. The city's not able to go into direct negotiations where a tender like this is in place. Our options are to either let the contract lapse and go back to tender, or continue with the extension as outlined in the original tender process. With regards to the ramifications, if the contract wasn't to be extended, in short, we would have to commence the tender process as soon as possible, and in the interim we would have to go to quote on each job that required this particular service. So there would be an administrative burden, and there would probably be some projects that would be marginally delayed as those quotes were sought.
That's all.
So just to clarify, there would be no dire consequences to the city if it was out to tender again to get a better, pricing structures in place.
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, I don't believe there'd be any dire consequences. As said, the impacts would be that we'd be at the mercy of getting quotes for each job, so there could be some reliability issues. Tenders also have minimum timeframes for contractors to respond when we ask them to do things, whereas where we're going to quotes, there's no guarantee we'll even receive a quote, let alone what the timeframe might be. So that would probably be the biggest risk that would face the city if the contract wasn't extended.
Thank you. Further questions? 12.20, CSRFF Club Nightlight Program 25-26. Questions on this item? Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that the application from the Whitfords Hockey Club is for floodlighting fittings at the Warwick Open Space. Should this be the Troy Pickard Hockey Centre rather than the Warwick Open Space? And secondly, it should be the South Ward is no longer responsible for that. It should be the South East.
South East, correct. No, I think, yeah.
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Yes, you are correct. It should refer to the Troy Pickard Hockey Centre and not specifically the Warwick Open Space is generally the more general area, but this application is for the upgrading of lights on the synthetic pitch at the hockey centre. That's correct. I'll make that amendment.
And the ward as well, please, Mr Smith. Thank you. Further questions? 12.21, mid-year review of the annual budget for 24-25 financial year. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Could I just get an additional point added to the recommendation? And this has been discussed with the Mayor and the administration to see if we can get something to say that we list for future consideration the Heathridge Centre project, Heathridge Park project.
Director Humphrey.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, I'm happy to work with Councillor Kingston on the wording of a amendment that would satisfy that.
Thank you.
Please CC me in that one as well, if you can. Thank you. Further questions on this item? Councillor Raftis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in regards to the additional employee costs, I just wondered if we could, first question, the initial budget based on 100% employment, are we able to determine what that figure was?
Yes, we can.
Councillor Raftis.
I'll be able to be told that here, or would that be taken on notice?
Through Mr Mayor, it's approximately 61 million is the direct salaries and wages cost, which is what we based the vacancy credit on.
Thank you. And then, as part of the budget approved for the current financial year, what was the amount that we included within that figure to cover the potential EBA back pay settlement?
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, it's not quite as simple as pointing to a figure in the current year budget. We have, in the last 3 years, allowed for increases in salaries and wages, which have been carried forward each year in the carry forward surplus. So I can't point to a figure that was specifically made in the 24-25 budget. The money would have been paid for from carry forwards from the previous 2 years. I'm happy to provide a reconciliation of that at the packs for Friday, though.
Councillor.
Yes, I distinctly recall during the budget process that there was a figure included and as part of that larger sum, so I'd be interested in knowing what that component was that was in the figure that the increased figure that we put in the budget last year for this item, which was up to $77 million in the budget, when we'd had actual of 66 the year before.
Director.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, as stated, I'm happy to provide that reconciliation of packs on Friday.
Thank you. I was wondering if that reconciliation could also include any other adjustments we put in there, such as allocation for capitalisation of labour to projects, and similarly if we're able to get these figures for the previous financial year budget as well, please.
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, yes, we can provide that and we'll go back to the past 3 years.
Are we able to be, can we also be advised of the vacancy rate for the city at the moment and what's been the average vacancy rate for the year to date?
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, I believe we'll be able to. What the vacancy rate will show is the number of, and I will have to substantiate this with the Manager of Human Resources, but my understanding is what we will be able to derive from the payroll system is the number of positions that currently don't have a full-time person. What might, or a permanent person, so to speak, if the position's part-time. What might be a little harder to provide, though, is where a position's being backfilled with either agency staff or casuals, but we will attempt to provide the most information we can on Friday.
Councillor.
Thank you. And it's further to the previous request on payments for the 6 months to contractors. Are we able to get as part of the report this week, a comparison to payments for labour hire for the comparable 6 months period for July to December 23?
Director.
Through Mr Mayor, I'm happy to provide comparisons for labour hire companies for the last 4 years.
Councillor.
I appreciate if we can get that, and then I'll look at an alternate regarding the employee cost number. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on this item? If no further questions, that concludes the public items. No, it doesn't. My apologies. One more. Thank you, Mr CEO. Petition requesting upgrade of Triton Place play space in the Central Ward. Any questions on this item? Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one really quickly in relation to some of the wording here on page 136. And it's just saying that it notes the renewal of the existing BMX bike track and supporting infrastructure. Could the city outline, does the infrastructure include the play space itself, or is it not including this play space?
Director Claassen.
Through Mr Mayor, no, it does not include this play space.
Discussed this one at length in the Central Ward budget session, which was yesterday. There being no further public items, I will thank Ms Kwok for her attendance, and we will shut the doors and proceed to the confidential item. Next item of business is reports of committees. Mr CEO, any further reports?
Not at this stage.
Or reports of the Chief Executive Officer, item 14?
Not at this stage.
Urgent business will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting on the 25th of February. Finally, number 16, motions of which previous notice has been given. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor O'Neill?
Yeah, just I have one in for this month with the resident parking permits.
Thank you. That being all, that concludes tonight's briefing session, and I hereby close the meeting at 8:36 p.m. Thank you all.